Welcome, fellow plebs. My name is Sean, and this is
Tribunus Plebis.
And welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today, we are going to take a look back at the Iraq War through the eyes of soldiers who served in it. When I found this video, I thought it would be a good one to watch and do a little commentary over, rather than do like a full essay about the war and what it meant. I watched a couple of minutes of this, so I have a few thoughts ready to go for, the beginning, but I avoided going too deep to keep this a little bit more interesting. Before the video starts, though, I'm just going to throw a few things out here because this video doesn't seem like it will go, much into what I'm going to talk about. But if they repeat what I'm saying, then I guess it will just be like reinforcement of the point. And I think that's a good thing. The first thing is that regardless of whether any of the soldiers in this little mini documentary have any good feelings at all about the war or not, this was indeed an illegal war and an unjust war. This was a war pushed for by a, kind of a weird, dumb nepotism baby president who just couldn't get over the fact that his daddy didn't kill Saddam Hussein. And that weird motivation was taken advantage of and piggybacked by both corporate goons and jingoistic USA chanting sacks of crap in the government and related think tanks. There was no justification for this war. We need to be clear about that. This was just some bloodthirst from a dullard, war criminal president and his crew of apex ghouls like Condoleezza Rice, Michael Chertoff, Robert Gates, Dick Cheney, and of course, Donald Rumsfeld. Plus dozens and hundreds of other losers and dorks and ghouls too numerous to mention. And you know what? I almost forgot about Paul Wolfowitz, who was maybe the most depraved warmonger amongst these depraved warmongers. Rumsfeld himself was perhaps the biggest of the Iraq War architects. After the war, a Pentagon Inspector General report said this about Rumsfeld's office. It, quote, developed, produced, and then disseminated alternative intelligence assessments on the Iraq and al-Qaeda relationship, which included some conclusions that were inconsistent with the consensus of the intelligence community to senior decision makers. End quote. In other words, they made stuff up and they used it to manipulate the country and the world. We should also note, of course, that it was under Rumsfeld's leadership that the horrors of the American torture and abuse at Abu Ghraib prison happened. The central claims of these absolute monsters when it comes to the war was that Iraq was stockpiling weapons of mass destruction, WMDs. They were not. It was all a lie. Every little bit of it was a lie, and it was an intentional lie. After the war was decided and the U.S. occupied Iraq for 10, 11 years, whatever it was, no stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction were ever found. They weren't found because they never existed, because it was all a lie. I'm going to be saying it was a lie a lot in this episode, by the way. And so before we hit play on this video, I just want to mention Colin Powell here for just a few moments. And hello there, everybody. As most of you probably know, this podcast takes a lot of time and effort to put together and, to get out there for you good folks to listen to. And you, our listeners, can help us by liking and subscribing on YouTube. So please take a second to click those little buttons. It helps a ton. And if you are feeling just a little bit more generous and you enjoy what we do here at Tribunus Plebis Media, you can help us earn just a little bit of money for the large amount of labor that we put into this thing by signing up on our Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can make a one-time donation or sign up for a recurring monthly subscription. We do all of this for free, and we will never run ads in our works. But any contributions really do help keep the show going and improving. The page address is buymeacoffee.com/tribunusplebes. And of course, all links will be in the show notes and descriptions wherever you are listening or watching. Thank you. And now, back to the episode. At the time, the then former General Colin Powell was Secretary of State, and he went to the UN to argue for an invasion of and a war with Iraq. He stood in front of the United Nations, this nation, and the world, and proceeded to tell a long series of lies, uninterrupted by either his own conscience or the truth. He literally just lied to the entire world to generate support for an obviously illegal, obviously immoral, and obviously evil war. And he succeeded. He would even concede later in life that the speech he gave contained, quote, substantial inaccuracies, end quote. Now, a lot of people, for some untold reason, actually maintain respect for this now dead monster, but he deserves absolutely zero respect from anybody. I know some people don't like to hear that. They hate the idea of talking bad about a supposed American hero, soldier, general, politician, whatever, and so on. But please allow me to illustrate just how awful of a man Powell was and how far back this awfulness extends, because many people who speak his name with reverence chalk the UN speech up to being a one-off error of judgment. So let's rewind to 1968 during the Vietnam War and the My Lai massacre, where about 500 unarmed Vietnamese civilians were gunned down by U.S. soldiers in cold blood. Victims included men, women, children, and infants. Some of the women were gang raped and their bodies mutilated before being killed, and some soldiers mutilated and raped children who were as young as 12. Seymour Hersh, the hero reporter who broke this story wide open, even said that some soldiers actually threw babies into the air and caught them with the points of their fixed bayonets. These are United States soldiers who did this. Now, Powell was not amongst the perpetrators, but he was assigned to investigate the massacre. He was a major at the time. At the time, Powell found no evidence of this massacre. And just to be clear here, it definitely did happen. We know it for certain now, and he definitely knew it for certain then. From the My Lai at 50 written case study, published by the U.S. Army Center for the Army Profession and Leadership, quote, soldiers actively hunted, herded, and killed elderly people, children, infants, and raped women while other soldiers looked on and did nothing to stop the massacre. An estimated 350 to 500 unarmed civilians died in My Lai. And just as an aside here, it's closer to 500. Let's be real. Major Colin Powell, a recently assigned Deputy G3, investigated the allegations described in the letter. He proved unable to uncover either widespread unnecessary killings, war crimes, or any facts related to My Lai. End quote. Later in life, Powell said this to Larry King in 2004. Quote, I was in a unit that was responsible for My Lai. I got there after My Lai happened. So in war, these sorts of horrible things happen every now and again, but they are still to be deplored. End quote. Machine gunning unarmed civilians, raping and mutilating women, raping and mutilating children, catching babies on bayonets. You know, it just kind of happens sometimes. Every now and again. Just the boys being boys, you know? This is what being a military officer and politician turns you into. It turns you into a man who could walk into a blood-soaked massacre scene, talk to Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr. and his aircrew, the men who saved many lives by threatening to open fire on fellow soldiers while also protecting the defenseless prey of these monsters, all while flying wounded Vietnamese to safety, and they blew the whistle on the massacre. It turns you into the sort of subhuman who could do all of that and still find no evidence. Colin Powell was not a good man. He was not a good soldier. I guess he was a good soldier if you look at it from a certain angle. And he certainly wasn't a good politician, not by any standards. So yeah, the war was based on lies, was illegal. It was pushed for by rabid, war-hungry goons as soon as 9/11 happened. They were just looking for any angle at all to launch it. And it was just a disgusting act of cowardice and evil. This disgusting war crime resulted in 4,500 U.S. soldiers killed and 32,000 U.S. soldiers wounded, plus another 50,000 or so servicemen injured, diseased, or other. 17 soldiers were captured, 9 of whom died in captivity. Another 300 soldiers from coalition countries were killed, and thousands more injured and wounded. This isn't even counting the amount of soldiers who arrived back home suffering wounds that no medic can see, like PTSD and other traumas. Nor does it count all of the vets who have sadly taken their own lives at some point after their deployment due to the trauma of their deployments. And that is nothing compared to the devastation on the other side of this farce of a war. Something like 1 million or more Iraqis were killed because of the war. About 400,000 of those were killed violently. The entire country flipped into chaos, the infrastructure ruined, the population terrorized, broken, and abused. Iraq was strip-mined of value by the occupiers. Dick Cheney made literally billions, over $40 billion, for Halliburton, the company that he was CEO of until 2000. Just as one example. But everyone involved in this pig went on to lucrative careers as board members and CEOs of various corporations all across the country, many of which are direct war profiteers like Honeywell and Raytheon. There was nothing heroic about this unjustified war. It was spurred by a weird revenge fantasy spun from the mind of a half-wit Nepo president and weaponized by demented souls like Cheney, Rumsfeld, and John Bolton, and then advanced by corrupted demons like Powell, and to be as charitable as possible, stunningly stupid journalists like Judith Miller, who helped stoke the fires of war by uncritically reporting information provided to her by the intelligence community. Stories which ended up being so unfathomably incorrect that even the New York Times would fire her for them in 2005. But of course, the damage was already done. And I do want to point out a certain aspect of, the reporting by these sorts of absolute buffoons like Judith Miller. The intelligence community provided fake information to Miller. Miller reported on it. Well, you know what? Actually, she didn't really report on it. She just repeated the lies for her benevolent benefactors who kept her stupid ass on the front page of the most prestigious paper in the country. Then, and please just focus here for a second and listen to this. People like Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell, the people who generated the lies that were fed to Miller, would then go on the evening news, lie to the country about WMDs, and then, and this is the kicker here, they would then point to Miller's reporting as proof of their claims. So they would feed Miller lies, she would just print them, and then they would refer to the lies that they provided to her, and which the New York Times printed, as proof. This idiot was a one-woman misinfo laundromat. Unreal. And this is why you should never trust reporting based on unidentified government sources. Do not ever trust them. Okay, so let's stop there and watch this video. I feel like maybe that was a little bit long of an intro, but I think we needed to talk about some of that stuff before we hit play. Okay, so let's see what's up here. And just to let you know, I think I might have said this before, but I watched the opening of this up until the guy stops rapping, which will make sense in a moment. It's only about a minute of it. It looks like it's a mix of vets who were positive about the experience of the war and others who aren't so positive, but we'll see what goes on. Let's start the video here. And this is put out by the New York Times. Oh, hang on a second. It was put out by the New York Times, so I expect it's probably going to be, a little lib-centered.
We all talk about how when we're going to go home, how proud we're going to be combat vets. I mean, how many people can say they're combat veterans? 19 years old, I fought in a war. That's awesome. Nothing can beat that. That's the coolest thing in the world, It'll be fun to look back on. Just waiting to get to that point where I can look back on it.
Here it is.
So like I was going to say before, this was put out by the New York Times, so I imagine it's going to be kind of, libbed up a little bit, lib-centered. And I think it's from, I only saw the first minute, maybe a minute and a half of this. So I think it's going to be a mix of like soldiers who were, had felt like they had positive experiences and a mix of other soldiers who had negative experiences.
We'll 2003, they got us out here in Baghdad, life is hard, got us pulling fucking 2 hours ago, and then they ump it up to 8 between 12, I don't give a fuck, I think I'm stuck in hell, I'd rather be there instead of jail, putting Baghdad on the map, send me my mail,
not a moment of the day that go by that not a thought about Baghdad never crosses my mind. It made me...
Yeah, but what he was saying there in that rap, it makes me think about like that he probably didn't grow up in the best neighborhood. Maybe didn't have a lot of options, not a lot of choices. And like he said, it was, sign up to go to war or have a good chance of going to jail. And it just makes me think about the idea of the poverty draft, which is, for anyone who's, not aware of that term, it basically means that, the Army is going to poor neighborhoods, poor schools, underserved communities and all that. And that's where they like to recruit. I don't know that poor people make up a disproportionate amount of soldiers, but they definitely recruit more, in those poor neighborhoods. Like I didn't have recruiting centers in the town I grew up in that was kind of, lower middle class, I guess, for the most part, kind of a depressed mill town that was still doing okay. But, I live near Springfield, Massachusetts, and they're not in the ritzy areas, the recruitment centers, they're in the north end, south end, where all the poor areas. And, basically we don't have an active draft, a draft that's ongoing right now, but we do have to register for the draft. And, so the system still exists. But they go to these poor neighborhoods and they hand out bonuses, the promise of free education, options out of these, poor neighborhoods, whether they're inner city or rural. And when you get offered, 30 grand and a college education, it can be tempting. I'm sure it can be tempting. Plus they can lie to you. Well, maybe they're not allowed to lie to you, but I know some people who feel like they got lied to and they call it a job. I wouldn't say it's a job. You sign to become low paid, like chattel labor, really. And, you go where they tell you. You don't have any choice once you're there. It's kill or be killed by the people that they tell you, where they tell you. Follow orders without question. Let your identity be subsumed to the whims of the Pentagon. All that stuff. And you do all that, not for the safety of your neighbors like they like to tell us, but rather for the profit of Raytheon and General Dynamics and Honeywell and Boeing and 1,000 other military industrial complex companies. And I know there's this narrative about, like, the poverty draft isn't real. It's not a real thing. But like I said, there's no recruiting centers in rich areas. They're like the wealthy area of Boston. I doubt that they have any. But the poor area, I bet you can find them. And sure, some, I guess, broad definition of middle income will change where these people fall on, the chart of who's not drafted, but who's recruited and not. But soldiers, they're not really coming from wealthy families around here. Let's be real. And when they are wealthy, they're going to academies, the military academies, and they're graduating as officers. And they're more likely to work in D.C. or behind the lines or at the Pentagon, I think. And if I'm wrong on that, I don't want to hear it. And and if there are exceptions, I don't want to hear that either. So let's move on.
Who I am today. Going to a country where you don't know nothing. Knowing it's going down. Knowing you're hearing the bombs and the gunshots. It's real now.
Hang on a sec. Is this drumming?
Give me my mail.
I think it's drumming.
Knowing it's going down. Knowing you're hearing the bombs and the gunshots. It's real now. Like you've been trained for it. They done told you about it. Now you're here.
Drummond, calm down. It's a wedding day. They always shoot up in the air on Wednesday. Yeah, nothing no man. I'm already ready.
That's the worst shit you can go through at the age that we.
And, now you're there. And none of those people, they even knew why they were there because nobody could give them a reason. The WMD thing, that was fake. And, the soldiers knew that they weren't going to find any right away. It was pretty quick. It was a very short time before everybody realized, like, oh, hey, there's nothing here. But they were still there. They were still being sent into dangerous situations. Danger which they created by being there, by being the invaders. And why? Like, I doubt their generals even could tell them. Because the generals were there because they were told to. They follow orders too. And we know why the president said to go. We know why Raytheon said to go. We know why Boeing, and on and on.
We was going through it.
They're trying to hit the compound.
Someone smoking a cigarette in the shitters?
Imagine this being 18, 19 years old, 20.
What are you going to do when you get out of the army?
Dropped into a foreign country where nobody wants you. Told to go kill and risk death, and it's all over some weird daddy revenge fantasy.
Be a fucking rock star.
I hope you made it.
Sometimes I remember, oh yeah, that's right, I went to Iraq. Now that I have a kid, sometimes I find myself thinking, is he going to end up going to some war that ends up not doing any good for the world and receive a bunch of shitty care afterwards?
It's a good question. It's an important question, especially if you have kids. You might want to follow in your footsteps.
I think we were in Baghdad for a few days, and then we were in a firefight outside the Abu Hanifa Mosque. And it was just totally bizarre. Just fucking gunfire everywhere, a couple of RPGs. And I was just thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? And that question never went away. I don't know how to explain the war to myself, and have yet to have any clear thought of like, yes, we actually made a difference there, because we didn't at all. There was no difference fucking made. Maybe for the worse.
The area I come from.
Imagine that, though. Imagine going into a war zone. You signed up for whatever reason that you signed up for, whether it was because you didn't have any options, like poverty draft stuff, or maybe because your family had a tradition of serving, or 9/11 happened, you felt moved to sign up, running away from something, running towards something, just being lost. I don't know, whatever your reasons are. You sign up, you think you're doing good. And you get there and you realize that not only are you not doing good, but you don't even know what your goals are. And, it makes no sense. It makes no sense, and I think that they figure that out probably pretty quick. But, they keep sending you back out. You watch your friends get injured. You watch friends die. Maybe you even get injured yourself. You get shot. And you just can't explain why any of this is happening. It must make you feel so damn helpless. Maybe disappointed. I would assume angry.
It's very small. Not a lot of opportunities for people fresh out of high school. So it's either community college or go do something. Travel the world, get paid for it, experience places like this. I had swore I'd never join the Army. I watched my brother come home all rigid when I was 12, and I was like, no way. And then he called me and he said, you watching this shit? And I said, what? He goes, turn on the television. And about 30 seconds after I turned on the television, the second plane hit. When that happened, one, I was mad, it's just my fucking backyard. But I immediately thought, this is what I need to do. I need to defend I just felt it. I just had to do it. I had to go join my brother. I had to be by his side. There was no way I was going to let my brother go into a war and me not be there.
So, 9/11, right? It's the kind of the ultimate recruitment boon. This guy, he says he never wanted to go, never wanted to sign up, saw his brother in the military, didn't like what he saw. But 9/11 happened. And knowing that his brother was out there alone, or not alone, obviously he's a soldier, but without him, and he wanted to sign up and help. And to be honest, I have a hard time relating to this because 9/11, that got me going the other direction entirely. I saw the reaction of the country, the bad reaction, and stuff like the Patriot Act, and all that other nonsense, the build up to the Iraq War, the rhetoric, just the awful stuff that was being said in this country to fire up the people. And it repelled me like opposing magnets, just shoving me away from those thoughts. But at the same time, I feel like I can empathize with these guys at least a little bit. I can understand how that event could, I don't even want to say radicalize, but that it can activate you in that way. And this guy sounds like his tour maybe didn't go all that well. I guess maybe we'll find that out here. But I think it's important for folks to hear stuff like this, to hear soldiers tell their stories that aren't all braggadocio nonsense. Hoorah and glad I killed those people and all that crap. This was a horrific war, and it was a war that was fought for no good damn reason that can be justified. It can't be justified at all. And for my listeners out there who maybe aren't as far down a path as I am, more centrist, radical, or not radical, centrist, liberal kind of people, I think it's really important that they hear people talk like this. I think the other thing here that I'm thinking about, obviously this guy's okay. He's here with us, but vets, I think, take their lives at something like a rate of 20 a day. 20 might be like a couple high, but it's something like that, 18, 20 a day. Veterans losing or taking their own lives. And, this number is not reflected in the casualty numbers that you see, how many dead, how many wounded. they don't count this, even though they are definitely casualties of war. You know, war is bad. War is horrific. And frankly, I don't really trust people that come back with a hard-on for what they did and pride in who they killed. So let's,
we'll keep one saw back here. Just know where your people are, and we got the rear. So we need to start holding that like we fucking mean it.
That deployment was funny because there was no clear-cut mission. The whole time you're wondering, like, what are we really doing? Are we really in combat? Are we not in combat? Who's actually the enemy? Now you're in Baghdad. Now you're in the heart of Adamiyah. Now what?
Yeah, what? I mean, why are you even there?
What was going through my mind was it was dark out and I couldn't see my fingers, basically. I was hoping I still had my fingers. I couldn't tell where I was shot. I just knew my arm was numb.
There's a guy got
and I found out I had my fingers and I could move them. The doc came by and he was patching me up and we just had a shallow conversation about, oh, wow, man, you got shot. And I was like, yeah.
And I think I was only 19 at that point.
Yeah, hey, 19.
And to be shot in the first 2 weeks of a 16-month deployment was
Jesus, 19 years old. Shot already, not even there 2 weeks. Into a 16-month deployment. That's how it starts. Yeah, I guess it was setting the tone, brother.
Setting the tone, to say the least.
Sorry about that.
IEDs are the scariest. Gunfire and crap like that shit don't bother me, it's whatever. But IEDs, they had that shit in garbage, man, and it could be anywhere.
And you ride through the hood and you see a milk jug on the side of the road, but the milk jug look kind of cut, or a trash bag. The trash bag look kind of ripped up. That's the shit that they will put the fucking bombs in.
Back up! Clear the road! Possible IED!
I don't see any wires, but it's on the surface.
We found Coke cans with plastic explosives in them on the corner. And when you're walking around a neighborhood that's literally trash up and down the streets, you can't really tell where they are.
Pick up that
you see us when
Jesus, God. For people who aren't on the audio, they showed a soldier just kind of cautiously walking up to a bag and just picking it up, checking if it's a bomb. And I mean, I can't relate to this sort of stuff at all, but it's just brutal to listen to and to see these people's faces. But I think that we should also recognize, and I know this is going to sound cruel or cold or treasonous or whatever if you're some jingoistic super patriot, but everyone out there waving American flags and cheering on wars like this and demanding that troops be sent somewhere across the globe for whatever reason, this is the result. This is what happens. You can cry about every soldier that died, but every single one of them is the fault of the people who sent them and the fault of the people who supported the people who sent them. This is what happens in a war. To get upset about death after you want war and you scream about wanting war, it's one of the ultimate hypocrisies. And it's not this dude in the video's fault. He was just there. I'm sure he signed up for all the air quote right reasons. And I want to be clear on that, but listen to the trauma of him talking about roadside trash, driving down the road and seeing a cut up trash bag and thinking, "Oh my God, that's a bomb." This is Colin Powell's fault. It's Bush's fault. And all the rest of them, not this guy's fault. You invade a country and you turn the population into freedom fighters, the people who don't want you there. This is what they were, freedom fighters. We call them insurgents in the media, but we are the only ones who call them that. They were calling each other freedom fighters. And we would too if somebody invaded this country. This is the only way for a populace who's facing a better armed, a better trained, a better equipped, logistically superior force You load the trash with bombs and you hope you kill somebody. This is the war that we made. This is the resistance that we created by starting the war. And we started the war because of sorry. We started the war because of lies that we believed, that we just, swallowed hook, line, and sinker.
We're going around corners and there's a box on the side of the road. It's just, cringe and take the turn. Hopefully you don't hear a bang.
I still cringe when I pass garbage. I ask my wife, she goes nuts. I avoid garbage like the plague on the road. I will swerve my car to the other side. She's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
We're riding in the open tailgate of a truck and people are getting fucked up all the time. And we'd still go out there with it.
Part of our $87 billion budget provided for us to have some secondary armor put on top of our thin-skinned Humvees.
Secondary armor. He's for people who can't see this, for the audio guys, he's pointing to sheet metal that looks like it was riveted to the outside of an unarmored Humvee. It literally looks like 1/16 of an inch thick, like just sheet metal you could buy at Home Depot or something.
This armor was made in Iraq. It's high quality metal, and it will probably slow down the shrapnel so that it stays in your body instead of going clean through. And that's about it.
That's about it. So, these guys, after his little display and his joke, you just see these 19-year-old kids, just falling out laughing. They're just looking like kids out of high school, man. Like your senior class just goofing around.
When we first got here, they were waving at us, and next minute, as soon as we drive by, we'd get shot at. And or some days they'd look at us mean and, give us gestures that they didn't want us there. And
when I first got there, I noticed a lot of people doing this to me. Fuck you. Fuck you, American. They didn't say fuck you. They were just...
He's making almost like a chef's
And about 4 months into it, my interpreter looks at me and goes, Sergeant Beatty, have patience. Wait, what? Have patience.
His interpreter, who he's supposed to be working with, is apparently telling him, he's making the FU sign as he says, have patience. The implication, I guess, being that his own interpreter was simultaneously saying, at least out loud, it'll be okay, just have patience, while also telling him to fuck himself with his hand. That can't feel good. That's got to be when you start to realize that you are not on the right side, that people do not want you, that even the people working with you are telling you to go fuck yourself. Jesus, I thought this was going to be a little bit of a different video, but I guess this is it. That's what we need to hear.
We hit houses with the wrong address.
Right here, if you didn't know that this was Iraq, you would say that's American policing. You would think this was an American police officer if I just played you that clip. Except, you'd know it wasn't an American police officer because he actually, is it Beatty? He actually sounds regretful for what he did. At least right here he does. American police are always kicking in the door of the wrong houses and the wrong block, the wrong family, and they're traumatizing people like this. Waking people up at the dead ass sleep 2, 3 a.m. and tormenting them with guns, tearing up their property as they search for drugs that probably aren't even there. Or if they do find them, it's like, 2 joints and a sniff of coke, and they put it on a table, and they take their photo with it, like, ooh, man, we did good today. Bunch of cowards. Because and then they leave, right? And they never make it right to anybody. And I doubt that this soldier made it right to anybody. I'm sure he just went about his day. This is probably all regrets later on. In the U.S., there was even a case of a deputy, I think it was in Georgia, who they served a no-knock warrant in the middle of the night. And they charged in, all geared up, rifles, looking like badasses, to terrorize a family, a mom, dad, and a baby. And the deputy threw a flashbang into the crib of the baby. It tore off its flesh enough that you could see its rib cage. I will never forget reading this story. And it covered the baby with severe burns. They tossed an explosive grenade into a baby's crib. And then the cops lied. They nearly murdered that baby. And the deputy was eventually acquitted. And the deputy had actually lied to get the no-knock warrant. He lied about everything leading up to it. He didn't buy drugs from anybody. The deputy didn't, witness any drug sales. He lied about the whole thing to get the no-knock warrant. They kicked in the door. I don't think they found any drugs. And they threw an explosive device into a baby's crib and almost killed it. No apologies. No admission of anything wrong. And the deputy who did it all, acquitted. It's all fine. You're a cop. And this soldier here, he probably faced, stricter rules about what he could do than the American police. And he probably felt worse. He probably felt bad. So sorry about that. I mean, I guess this is about Iraq. So we'll get back to Iraq.
And then we'd have to apologize because we just kicked your door in, or we just...
That's what I'm saying. It's like, and then we had to apologize. I don't know if he means that literally, if they actually did apologize, but American police aren't even going as far as saying, like, I was wrong.
Blew your door in, or we just damaged your house at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Door right here.
And just imagine how many people in Iraq, Iraqi citizens, I mean, not enemy combatants or whatever, how many of them would be radicalized by actions like this? Like, whatever people weren't like fervent freedom fighters, upon the invasion or in the first weeks or months of it, people who were just trying to get by. And, let's be real. Some Iraqis, they welcomed Americans coming into the country because Saddam wasn't exactly a progressive peacenik. I think we can admit that, right? He wasn't a great dude. But how many of them start to flip when they see houses being destroyed and people killed for no reason at all? When they see U.S. soldiers kicking down innocent people's doors, just, shopkeepers and, I don't know, officials, hurting their families, destroying their property, probably killing people. It's terrible.
Stay well to the front. Stay well to the front.
They're going into another house here, audio people.
Hold on. Get down. Get down. Get down.
No rest. No rest.
I mean, look at this. You got like an older woman and a child being forced down a flight of stairs in their own home at gunpoint, at the muzzles of multiple rifles pointed at them, and probably for nothing. It's unbelievable. This is what happens when a president with daddy issues, who is, manipulated by his handlers, aka the military industrial complex and all the goons that I mentioned earlier. And we send people to war with no clear goals beyond making these companies richer, billions and billions of dollars richer. And with a goal of strip mining these countries of their mineral wealth, their material wealth, taking as much of it as they possibly can. And then we take the surplus weapons and vehicles that we use or don't use, that we spend too much money on, and we give them to, or at least sell them very cheaply to, American police forces. My own town famously has 2 rocket-propelled grenade launchers, which it has to spend extra money on every year to store safely. And, we don't need RPGs. It's absurd that they exist in this town. Just saying that our police department has 2 RPGs that they're terrified to even store. Why do they have them? It's because, some swine somewhere in this town thought, wow, that would be badass. And now that it's like a white elephant. It's like financially crippling the police department to keep these things safe.
I still hear it, and the psychological side of it now, I still carry.
Hey.
Yeah, you see that in the camera. I'm journalist, you do that. You're mistaken this.
I'm sorry to kind of keep going back to American policing, but this is American policing. Everything that we've seen here, this is American hogs, prime, grade A, USA approved swine. This is a reason that, you know what?
Quiet.
It's okay.
I still think about that guy. I still remember punching him in the face.
When he was going for this, when I punched him in his fucking face.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, there's his glasses right there. He was going for the AK.
If you look and you put yourself in their place, how would you feel if you had someone kicking in your door,
going for an AK,
and you as the man want to protect your family, and me coming through the door with bad intentions?
I mean, this is, again, I'm going to do it again. I'm sorry, but this is policing. This is, one of the reasons that no-knock warrants are so bad. You wake people up, they're disoriented, you start shouting, waving guns around, and they want to protect their family. They want to protect themselves. They want to protect their home. Instinctively, they want to do that. So they jump up and they get shot, or they get punched, or they actually maybe get their weapon, and before they can even comprehend what's going on, before they even understand that it's cops in the house, they get killed. And then the police justify the shooting like cowards. And at least this guy still seems to think about it and seems to feel bad. That sounds crueler than I wanted it to, but it seems like he understands what he did. And I don't think that American police feel bad at all. They get off on it. They get off on the power. And, when the cops in Memphis murdered Mr. Nichols, one of them was seen on the body cam talking about how good it felt to hit and kick him, even as paramedics were trying to save him. That's what being a cop puts in your soul. You get off on the murder, you get off on the violence, you get off on the power because, if they mouth off, you justify it. If they run, you justify it. If they just aren't a cop, you justify it. And all your boys in blue will back you up. We saw Breonna Taylor, right? No knock. They kicked in the door 2 a.m. or something. They killed that guy for trying to protect himself. And her. Jesus. I mean, there's so many of these stories, it's hard to keep them straight.
Because the intel that I received told me you're a bad guy.
Just shut your mouth when you're asked. Just shut your mouth.
Right? And that's not once. Of course there's going to be a response from the person in the house.
I'm always going to carry that.
And he obviously feels bad.
I'm still working on that.
Pick him up. He goes outside the wall.
Just I told him shut your mouth.
But, this is also, I think, culture too. I'm not, I've never been in the military, but I've seen American cops. And, I know that the police culture is to insulate, form ranks, back to blue, never admit fault, never admit to lying, always protect each other. That's the police code. And, I don't think that particular police culture extends across oceans and into foreign countries in the military in quite the same way. But it might. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody told me it did. I mean, we've seen cover-ups in the military. I just don't know enough, but I doubt it's quite the same because cops, they put on that badge and it feels like it signifies something, like it changes a human being. But anyway, I guess I got to admit that I'm a little ignorant of military culture, so I'm just going to move on.
Yeah. He's protecting his house. He gets punched in the face, put on his damn back, ends up in Abu Ghraib, and he's never going to get that.
Abu Ghraib. I did not. I was not expecting Abu Ghraib for sure. Yeah, he.
That time back.
Yeah, he's never. Jesus Christ. Yeah, he's never going to get that time back, man. You don't get time back from going to a torture prison. You can't untorture somebody. It doesn't work like that. And imagine living with that too. Like you already are dealing with the idea, the guilt, the feeling of kicking in a door, terrorizing a family, punching a guy in the face who was trying to protect himself. And then they go to the elite torture prison of the region because of what you did to their family. He certainly will not get that time back or ever be the same person ever again, if he ever even got home again.
So I think about that.
I don't feel like I'm defending my country anymore, and that kind of sucks. And that's the whole purpose when you're a kid to join the army. A lot of people feel it's like, defend your country, but we're not defending our country anymore. I know we haven't defended our country in a while, but
I didn't agree with the Iraq War when I went in. I went in for Afghanistan. I joined to go fight in the mountains. I wanted to fight the Taliban. Unfortunately, once you join, you have no politics. You're property. You go where they send you.
You're a chattel worker. So this guy, I mean, this is pretty wild. Here we have a guy who never wanted to be in the military, whose brother was in, and he signed up after 9/11 to fight the Taliban alongside his brother, a war that he at least believed in at the time. And then he finds himself sent to a pointless revenge, money grab war in Iraq, and he doesn't agree with the entire thing. And this is what I mean when when I was saying you become property, you become chattel. He's forced to fight this pointless, directionless, again, cash grab war every single day. And, he was there doing this, and it was futile because it was nothing but a Halliburton ploy to fleece Iraq and the American people of hundreds of billions of dollars. And if you refuse to fight, congrats, you're going to military prison.
when I was 20, I thought we were invincible. We were kids. We were just invincible. We're going to go here, we're going to do this, and we're going to get out. And I tell people to this day, the day that I grew up was November the 1st, 2003. That was the day I grew up.
I think this is the day we all grew up.
What happened on November 1st, 2003? November 1st, 11/1. Doesn't ring a bell.
And you say that day, you just
got the call over the radio and that one of our Humvees was engaged with some kind of RPG or IED. Nobody knew what it was at first. It just hit, and it hit hard. Our Humvee was limping back to the compound.
The date's
and
not
we're getting status reports
like a national thing. It was
constantly
something in their unit.
And we all just kind of
somebody had to have died.
Went on with what we had to do that
Probably
night.
The first one that died.
And then we got up the next day, and they told us we had a 9 o'clock formation. Nobody told us it's a Y. And I lined up the whole battery. And the BC came out, and he was already crying. He was really shook up. And we knew something was bad. And he told us that during the night that Lieutenant Colgan had died.
Colgan.
And then everybody's heads just went down. It was,
I imagine it's probably the first guy to
hear
unit.
the gasps and tears on a lot of people.
I think most people really wanted to go out and just kill everybody after that. It was the first death we had suffered in the battalion, and then we'd had people hurt, but no one had died yet. That's a really big thing to just grasp all of a sudden.
This video's not shaping up like I thought it would. I really thought there'd be a lot more apologia in here coming from the New York Times.
Things you'll never forget.
Several other people in our unit were killed. Lieutenant Saltz, PFC Moore, Sergeant Major Cook was killed, Sergeant McKeever.
Rest in peace, boys. I don't like talking about that shit. That shit is so fucking depressing, man. You just have no idea. You have no idea. Man.
I truly do not have any idea, my friends.
So what does it do to a generation of young people during these deployments?
I mean, this is, one of them said it was the day that they all grew up was when their buddy died in this pointless act of violence in a pointless war. That's no way to quote unquote grow up. These dudes turned into, young men who were way too old, way too soon for this shit. Way too soon.
They become old. They are old young men.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I feel more grown up. I mean, I've changed a lot in the last, year. For people back in the States, it was just a year. Nothing really changed. They just got a year older. For me, it was like
old young man.
A lifetime. I feel I've grown up 20, 30 years out here.
Imagine that. That's 1 year. That year must seem like something.
And every
else.
day it was, well, I guess I'm just doing what I'm doing today so that I can get to tomorrow, so that we can get to our 365 days and leave. And then that changed. Then we stayed out there for a few more months. I think it was like 419 days that we were there.
Obviously, these guys just told us all, right? Getting dropped into this insane war, on this bizarre war zone that just makes no sense, being constantly in danger for no good reason, watching friends die, being terrified of trash on the road, being hated by even people that are supposed to be helping you, growing up far too fast and far too soon and seeing way too much, and sending people to torture prisons.
Maybe George Bush should fund my fucking guitar business.
He owes me a beer, at least. at the minimum.
And it turned from gung-ho, let's, save America, I can't wait to look back on what I did here, to let's just survive to the end of our tour so that we can get the fuck out of here pretty fast. That's a quick turnaround, right? I guess that's part of the growing up. When you get shot, you see your buddies die, and you have no idea why you're there. When you realize the con and the absurdity of, the murderous indifference of your supposed leaders. The first scene, that opening scene, it just sounded like they were talking about how invincible they felt as young men at 19 years old. Months later, all of that aging just has them eyeing the door. And, like he just said, it just gets yanked further away from them. When when nobody else wants to join, or the war has become so expansive that there just aren't enough people there. They can't fill the ranks, so they got to hold guys over. I remember when that was in the news, really, talking about extending all these deployments and how upset people were. But, at the same time, I guess, again, we have to keep centering the idea of how entrenched the war itself had become and why, and who had entrenched it, right? Halliburton and General Dynamics, they weren't done with Iraq after 6 months or a year. Not by a long shot. Not by like over a decade. I mean, they're still probably raking in millions over there every year, billions every year.
The Iraqis are probably...
I mean, and you know what? Bush doesn't owe this guy a beer. The world, this country and the world, they owe George Bush a handcuffing and a dragging to The Hague to be tried for war crimes.
Wondering how in the hell are they supposed to believe in a system that we force-fed them when our system doesn't even work. Going back to George Floyd. 2 words, not okay. There's actually a picture of me in Time magazine with my knee on a suspected terrorist's chest.
I mean, look at this. Like, they're actually showing, for the podcast guys, this soldier kneeling on the chest. It's not like exactly what Derek Chauvin did, but he's realizing that what he did, how he was behaving, the actions that he took out there in Iraq are very much like what Derek Chauvin did, that pig that killed George Floyd. And seriously, think about watching a cop murder a man on the street and identifying with the cop's actions in the worst way like this, like viewing that cop as a murderer, as the villain. Like, that cop is the villain in this man's eyes. And he's saying, that was me. He's seeing the same connection in some ways to policing that I went off on a tangent about a few times, probably because, I guess, so many cops are former military. And, they see how bad it is. There's not much left here, just a few minutes. I don't even want to see what they're going to hit me with, man.
It wasn't on his carotid artery. It was across his chest. All these shootings, not okay.
My mom doesn't like the Army too much because, I mean, took both her boys and we're over here, and, you know, she hates that. But she's very proud, and nothing beats it. It's the greatest feeling in the world.
That was before he saw what he saw. He was still happy to be there. When he still
Jason's
believed.
bike was always affectionately known as the asshole, because that was my brother.
Oh no, he's talking about his brother in the past tense. Fuck, I missed it. His brother died over there, didn't he? Oh no. Alright. For the audio guys again, sorry video people, but I want to make sure people understand what's going on. The guy who he rode up on his brother's bike, it cut to a screen. It says this. It says, in 2020, Camisso's brother Jason took his life after 4 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. So his brother came back and took his own life. And, you know, taking a life is nothing that we should take less than seriously. You know, I hope that's stating the obvious here. And like I said, I'm pretty sure I had recently read that about 18 or 20 vets take their own lives every day. Every single day. And I can't name, all of the reasons, but some of the vets are, sorry, I'm just trying to look up the number. So, all right, I just quickly looked it up on my phone, and the current rate for veterans is about 17 per day. And I don't know all of the reasons, but some of the stuff that these vets are discussing in this video, it must certainly contribute. You know, I'm not sure what else to say here.
When shit gets dark, you know, and you're thinking about ending it or whatever, you call someone. Jason was that phone call for me, and I was always that phone call for Jason. So it was hard for me when he did do what he did. You know, the first few months, and then he called. Why didn't he call me? And I don't have the answer.
And that's the end of the video. Yeah, hang on a second. How do you go back, Jay? I want to see the names of the soldiers there. Get my read. Robert Beatty, Joshua Chitwood, Michael. Oh no, this is in the way. I can't move it. Michael Camisso, I think it was. Javorn J. Drummond, Thomas P. Sussdorf, and Stuart Wilf. Well, I mean, that's the video, guys. Jesus. Okay, so this is the second one of these reaction type episodes I've done, and I hope it wasn't too incoherent. This sort of thing isn't really my wheelhouse, to be honest, but I'm trying to kind of expand what we are doing here a little bit to create more and better content. If you like it or hate it, let me know. I want to make a better product for the folks who enjoy what we do here, even if that means not adding or changing anything at all. So please let us know in the comments. But I also want to share a few parting thoughts about this war, I think. And just let me take a second here. That video was kind of heavy. I mean, Jesus. Whew. Okay, let's start by reiterating again that this war cost the lives of over 1 million Iraqis, according to various counts and estimates done in 2015. And who knows how many more can be added onto that in the years since. There are still Iraqi children who were born and raised in areas that the United States fired countless rounds of depleted uranium into, who were born with birth defects and high rates of cancer, as an example. If they die in their 40s due to tumors, will these count as war deaths? Probably not by some hack standards that the U.S. will, force a UN to adopt or something to try to hide the unhideable here, that the U.S. destroyed and raped this country for imperial profiteering. And you know what? Actually, I think I actually mixed up two stories. The high cancer rates were from Desert Storm and depleted uranium then. I mixed them up, I think. But, I don't even know if it matters because the U.S. just did it again in the Iraq invasion. The United States fired something like 1,000 metric tons of depleted uranium into Iraq's soil and water supply. And this is, of course, in addition to 300 tons fired into the ground during Desert Storm. Children, especially from the southern city of Basra, which was particularly hard hit with this depleted uranium, they had a 60% higher cancer rate than normal after the first war. And after Desert Storm, they were being born in this area with abnormalities which did not seem to exist in the medical literature. We literally created entirely new medical conditions in these children with our weapons. Let's also remember the people that we've been referring to as the architects of the Iraq War for just a minute. People like Paul Wolfowitz, who was the Deputy Secretary of Defense for Bush, and once 9/11 happened, he began chomping at the bit to invade Iraq despite it having no connections to the attack. In the first emergency meeting of the National Security Council on the day of the attacks on 9/11, Rumsfeld asked, "Why shouldn't we go against Iraq, not just Al-Qaeda?" And Wolfowitz added that Iraq was a brittle, oppressive regime that might break easily. It was doable. Eventually, he obviously succeeded in helping create the illegal war that he so desperately wanted. After the war, he became part of the American Enterprise Institute, a neocon think tank. John Bolton, a man who never saw an illegal invasion that he didn't like, was supporting invading Iraq since at least 1998. He spent much of his time as the State Department's primary arms control guru, lying to the government and the American people about Saddam Hussein buying uranium from African countries. To do this, the State Department and the intelligence agency of Italy at the time released a forged document into the wild which showed that Hussein made an attempt to buy yellowcake uranium from Niger. And I said it was forged. It wasn't real. The United States used these fake documents, which they helped leak, as supposed proof that Iraq was trying to build WMDs, and they used it as justification for the sanctions and invasion. None of this was true. And as a reward for these lies, Bolton was made ambassador to the United Nations. Do we see the theme yet? Stephen Cambone was part of Rumsfeld's plan to politicize even more the intelligence wing of the government, where he would become Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and head the Iraq Survey Group, a CIA operation. He was deeply involved in the torture prison called Abu Ghraib. Upon leaving the Pentagon, he took a job with defense contractors and now teaches at Villanova. He later said that invading Iraq was maybe the greatest decision of the 21st century. Colin Powell himself joined the boards of Salesforce and Bloom Energy. Condoleezza Rice joined the boards of JP Morgan, Dropbox, and Mackinac Capital. Stephen Hadley and Lloyd Austin went to the boards of Raytheon. Trust me, the list goes on and on. They created an invasion out of thin air with lies. They sent young American men and women to die in a desert that we never belonged in. They strip mined the resources and wealth of that country, even as they bled the population. They stole and plundered and murdered everywhere that they went. This is no exaggeration, by the way. These people truly are disgusting, evil beings. They killed over 1 million Iraqis. They ruined the childhoods and lives of thousands or tens of thousands of American soldiers and their families. Maybe not all of them regret the war as much as the guys we saw in that video, but even the gung-ho guys brought some bad shit back with them. People joined for what they thought were the right reasons, to fight the war that they thought was justified. Then they just got sent to Iraq to fight for Raytheon and abuse Iraqis and just try to survive the wrath of the Iraqi freedom fighters. They created all of these atrocities, and they did it with malice, and they did it with forethought. And they did no good with any of this. And as punishment for these most obvious and brutal of war crimes, not to mention every other law that they broke along the way to get there, these pieces of crap were given plush positions, millions of dollars, and they are treated as celebrities by most of the media in this country and giving fawning interviews by insipid, dull haircuts and pantsuit types. Rather than do the very least one could do and drag Bush to The Hague, where he honestly should be—
This is illegal, you know.
—for what he perpetrated here as president, the news instead shows him painting on his ranch and says, "Aw shucks, isn't that cute?" The dude failed as a pilot, failed as a soldier, failed as a governor, failed as a baseball owner. And then he failed to just be intelligent. But in this one aspect, I guess he did succeed. He became a war criminal. He facilitated the murder in premeditated fashion of 1 million Iraqis. He made corporations wildly wealthy, and finally, perhaps, he even made his CIA goon father proud of him for committing massive, sweeping, and murderous war crimes, including bringing torture back into the spotlight. And oh my God, I almost forgot about Gitmo. Can you believe that? That's a whole other story. And all of this was intentional. There were zero mistakes here. There were no mistakes. This was being planned as far back as the 90s. 9/11 just turbocharged it. They did not screw up. They did not make a mistake. It was not an error in judgment. They planned this intricately. They lied knowingly and they lied willingly. They forged documents. They fed idiot reporters false information and then used that reporting to support the lies that they told. It was all intentional. I keep repeating it, but I want everybody to hear that. It was absolutely and remains a war crime. I want everybody to understand this. Absolutely none of these people deserve either forgiveness or the chance at redemption. The crime was just too great in too many ways. And you know what? It doesn't even matter, because not even like one of these people, not one of them, has ever even put one foot on the track to redemption. They're not looking for it. They're fine with what they did. Please don't ever try to find a way to justify this atrocity. Don't let people refer to this as anything other than what it was, an illegal, unjust war. Never stop telling people, never stop reminding them, never forget what they did to Iraq or what they did to those who served, and never forgive them. They do not deserve it. And that, my friends, is the end of the episode. If you like what we're doing here at Tribunus Plebis, please consider visiting our Buy Me a Coffee page and signing up for... You know what? It doesn't even feel good to try to do a little ad here, but hey, buymeacoffee.com/Tribunus Plebis. It's in the description. Please go to the YouTube page, youtube.com/@Tribunus Plebis Media. You know, like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. Thank you guys. I love you all.